Hi, folks. Welcome to Thursday's edition of the I Write Radio podcast. And welcome to those of you that caught us on Indy Live Radio at 11 p.m. last night, a regular slot, I believe. I've got Jimmy Hutton with me today. Hi, Jimmy.
Afternoon, Norman. How are we?
Not bad, not bad. And Stuart Lockhead. How you doing, Stuart?
I'm good. I'm looking out at the rain, but there you go. Looking forward to the show. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm Norris Stewart. Today we had the last Nicola Sturgeon press conference for this week. Reminder to everybody that it's now 12:15, not 12:30. Next week it will be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday again, I believe. And something else happened today. It's totally, oh yeah, the Prime Minister has flown into Orkney, where I believe there was socially distanced demonstrations of, I don't suppose they will be welcoming demonstrations, but there you go.
Oh no, there was I did see a picture of a small party of people who were there to welcome him, mate. I think there were about 6 or 7 of them, and they were the kind of people whose ma looks like she's possibly their auntie as well, if you know what I mean.
Oh, no.
These were the guys who were carrying the support no cards.
They said something very stupid. What was it they said?
We said no, why doesn't she listen?
Have we got a date on that picture?
No, mate, I just seen it on Twitter.
We say no, why doesn't she listen? Exactly. What on earth that got to do with a visit from the Prime Minister? Christine
Jardine was on the radio this morning claiming that support for independence was only 45% and that the vast majority of people in Scotland didn't want another referendum. So obviously she's so up to date, she hasn't seen a poll since 2014.
Yeah, well, she's a bit like, what was it, Tom Harris, McTernan. She's really hard-nosed unionist, and they call her out. She goes on the media all the time. Even when she wasn't elected, she was never off for the Lib Dems.
Well, she really is hardcore unionist.
Oh, I
wonder if she's got a pension linked to London or something.
She's famous for telling lies.
Aye, well, the Liberal Democrats never fail to amaze me with the absolute ability. I mean, they started this, not the Tories. I mean, they've been lying on their election literature for years, and they never get pulled for it.
Do you think
it's campaigning?
Do you think the MP will be turning up to go around the sites in Orkney with Boris?
Who? Carmichael the liar.
Aye, Carmichael the liar.
That wouldn't surprise me.
They'd need a guy big fridge to get them two in it.
A walk-in fridge, possibly. Okay, guys, today's press conference. Stuart, you always watch it assiduously.
Yes. Let's cover it cover it briefly first. She focused on shielding advice because there were the people who've been shielding are going to get some relaxation of that. She came out with quite an interesting summary of the infection rates and things, and she was very pleased with it. Which she was, she said, "No, we're doing well. Local infection rates very low." Oh no, sorry, the local infection rate. That's a minor detail, but we could come back on that. One of her statements was that she seemed to be looking for slogans. She said, "All of us depend on each other," which was like, somebody told her to come out with something that can be a slogan. She did get ahead of the curve with, she talked about an islands deal. In fact, sorry, that was Fiona Hislop, the economy secretary. Yeah. Before we even heard the headline news on the telly barely from Boris Johnson saying that there is an islands growth deal, which covers the Western Isles, Orkneys and Shetlands, and each of the governments, the Scottish government and the UK government, are putting in £50 million each. Great.
I kind of coughed at that one because most of these regional deals that are split between the UK government and the Holyrood government. Scotland tends to put just a little bit more into them.
Usually.
And I actually thought Orkney we were putting in more than England, than the UK government. But I might be wrong. So who knows? Anything?
So the first, Fiona Hislop, she also went into quite some interesting detail about the total state borrowing, and she gave some figures that I'll need to go back and look at a recording to get the detail. She said something about 1.98 trillion pounds had been borrowed to support, and I doubt if that's just for Scotland. 99.6% of what? I can't remember, but it's the biggest amount borrowed for 300 years. Jimmy will have these facts because he's hot on this.
Yeah, well, the 1.98 trillion is the UK national debt, and it's 96% of GDP.
Thank you.
And I think, basically we're up to our neck in it, desperately hoping, shouting out to people, don't make waves in case it comes up over our nose. That's the UK debt mountain or debt fest, whatever you want to call it. And Fiona was just gently pointing out that all this broad shoulders and the strength of the UK Treasury, well, the UK Treasury ain't that strong when you're 2 trillion in a hole. You can call it as strong as you want, but it's just Boris bluster that he's learnt at the feet of the bold Donald.
Mm-hmm. You see, they went into that hole quite a while ago, didn't they?
Mm-hmm.
The borrowing hole for the UK economy went into was, I mean, that somehow or other they managed to go into that 2 or 3 years ago for some reason.
Yeah, it went for about like 600 million to where it is now in the space of a decade.
I mean, it's
when they were also cutting.
When they were doing austerity as well. How did they manage that?
Well, they do it by not getting the other thing right. I mean, austerity is all right. That's fine. If you just want to starve people and keep them out of hospital, but you need to up production.
Right.
You know, so you need one guy to produce more than he produced last week.
I think that's called investment that they didn't do, isn't it?
Yeah, then that's exactly what it comes down to. If you don't buy new machinery so a guy can become more productive, you know, I mean, if what you're using breaks down 3 times a week, your productivity is going to fall. And the Tories are really good at going on about how bad we are at productivity and forgetting to mention they don't encourage investment to ensure that productivity rises.
Well, they've been following monetary theory, the Chicago school, ever since Thatcher was in power, and that doesn't include real infrastructure investment. Although we've been hearing a whole load of different stories, plans.
Yeah, it was
what the Tories want to do is get to a position where you've got a pile of money and use that money to make more money. Production and manufacturing with this particular Tory government really isn't of much interest. They just want to use the financial system to generate cash for themselves.
Yes, but even monetarists are focused on the unemployment rate of this has been the same all the way through the 20th century and into this century. It still is a key percentage that even Donald Trump is focused on, because they fear the unemployment rate getting too high.
Well, they'll absolutely stop focusing on it from now because it's going to go through the roof, and they will want people to ignore that.
Oh, absolutely, but their own backers, the city and the hedge funds people, they have always, in recent years, that's all they focused on. They only want.
Well, they'll ignore it until they start cutting wages.
Yeah. Can we come back to the presser, because the First Minister, I think she had a good time. Let's be honest, she enjoyed herself today, because we were all waiting for all the questions about Boris. And she took advantage of a few things. She said, "Look, I'm not going to champion use a pandemic as a political tool." And she accused Boris of crowing. I don't know what the might of the union.
His whole visit has been about crowing. It's all about how wonderful Britain is, how much money we can spend on you. Delicately not pointing out that it's our own money or that it's borrowed money. It's certainly not largesse coming from the depths of the UK Treasury.
And she did use the platform to point out that any money borrowed has to be paid back, and Scotland will be paying it back with interest.
There you go.
As per usual.
Now, what was interesting was that this first question about Boris being here in Scotland came from the Channel 4 reporter, Kieran Anderson or something, Irish fella. Sorry, Jimmy?
Kieran Jenkins.
Yeah, an Irish fellow who's come out with a few in-depth exposes over the course of, I think it's June it was. And I just realised he hasn't been to any, there hasn't been a Channel 4 reporter at the briefing for a long time. So that was interesting. The First Minister also was asked about, now who was it this time? Fraser Nichol of Global, I don't know who it was, some radio station in Aberdeen, I think. And he had a go and said, why didn't you match England? We've got a P&J Arena here in Aberdeen and they can't have any concerts. And she said, well, I don't want to match England with the rate of the virus. Do you think I should?
Well, the whole thing, I think she dealt with it well by saying, look, this is a coronavirus press conference. This isn't a political press conference. I am prepared, especially with, is it Chris Musson from The Sun, who interrupted three times to try and push it to the edge. And all he was looking for was to create a headline saying, Nicola Sturgeon hates Boris Johnson and thinks he should stay out of Scotland. The satisfaction she did not give him. I thought she dealt with it all very well. And, okay, we're biased. We're supporters of Nicola Sturgeon, I think. But having watched PMQs yesterday, there's her ability at the podium. And these are questions she doesn't know are coming. There's nobody there to give her a nice, easy question to make her position look good. These are all aggressively anti-Scottish government questions that are coming to her from the press. I mean, the National wasn't there today, was it?
No. These are the journalists that turn up or sign on for the briefing. I mean, it's not something constructed like Number 10's briefings were constructed to have a message. It's random.
Well, I'm pretty sure that the Sun's headline vis-a-vis Nicola Sturgeon tomorrow will be Nicola Sturgeon refuses to answer Indy questions on currency.
Well, fortunately, the Sun people didn't even wipe their butts with it in Scotland anymore. So the likes of Chris Musson, I'd imagine he might go on the naughty step for a couple of days, but I didn't see it's worth their while. Bring him back on Tuesday. He's pretty easy to bend over and slap.
So presser today, summary, big news for those that are shielding, nay news for those that were looking for an argument about Boris Johnson coming to Scotland.
Oh, they'll confect it anyway. They'll confect an argument anyway, mate.
Well done, Jimmy. That's funny. I was just rehearsing using that word myself.
Oh, you rehearse, do you? You cheat, you.
No, I was trying to think of a word to explain exactly what Jimmy was thinking about. And I've never used it before on this show, so well done, Jimmy. We're thinking alike.
I think dear, that's a worry. I better get another pint down my neck. I think we should point out that she did take no joy, but she took satisfaction in the fact that there's only been one COVID death in Scotland in the last 15 days.
Yeah.
Again, our numbers are going in the right direction. And as you say, when asked if she would like to match England, she pointed out quite clearly, no, I'd really rather not. Because there was another 100 and odd people died in England yesterday. And they seem to be quite happy if they've got, if there's 70 or 80 or 100 people dying, they seem quite happy at that number. That seems to be where Boris is they find that acceptable. We don't.
I noticed Tom Gordon from the Herald has harped back to an old story, which was the criticism made of the 5 times lower claim that
Aye, what was
Sturgeon
that about?
made. Well, weeks ago. I mean, I don't even think it was last week. I think it was the week before.
No, it's a couple of weeks that's been running, but mate, it was somebody at the ONS questioned it, and somebody else at the Stats Bureau questioned it. They said that the statistics upon which she based that claim were rather opaque. They are rather opaque, but they're rather opaque because England makes them opaque. They have been making their stats opaque since day one.
Well, she pointed out today that that claim was based on UK government statistics, not Scottish government statistics, which I hadn't realised.
Yeah, I mean, you can see the prevalence rates. You can go. It's no difficult to go and find them. I think Tom Gordon, he's just doing what he's told me. His editors clearly told him to discredit the First Minister in any possible way that he can. So he tries it every day and he fails every day. I mean, he's consistent.
Okay, let's move on to the other big news of today. Bojo's in Scotland,
Yes.
way up to Orkney for his first stop. Have we any idea who he met in Orkney?
No, there was a nasty rumour floating about that he was going to the Orkney Creamery to talk about their ice cream, but I think that was just because it's possibly the biggest fridge on Orkney. So I've no idea where he went.
You worked hard. Nah, Jimmy, you worked too hard for that one.
Aye, I did a bit. Aye, but I did note that he'd done. I seen a snippet of an interview that he'd done, where he told us that we were to stick by the 2014 result because it's certainly not been a generation. And I was delighted that he used that word because the only mention, as we've said before, of a political generation in anything legally binding that the British government has signed up to is in the Good Friday Agreement. So we've only got to wait till next year because the Good Friday
7
Agreement
years.
states that 7 years is the term between referendums. So I'm looking forward to next year. I think we should just have a referendum alongside our election and be done with it.
I hope we're not going down that road today. I'm not ready for that one. Yes, we can get tomorrow, by all means. I see Kenny McCaskill had an article in Scotsman, which you posted, Norrie. I was glad to be able to read it because the Scotsman I'm not signed up for.
Nor I. It was on Twitter.
You can, it's bad when Murdo Fraser's retweeting Kenny McCaskill's articles, though. At that point, McCaskill should be thinking about writing something better. If the person that retweets you is the old Murdo.
Well, I have to admit, I had to go up and check the author of the article when I read it, because I thought it actually made me think it was Kenny Farquharson, because it had that kind of whiff of anything but independence about it to begin with.
I thought there was a paragraph missing because it seemed to lose its train of thought halfway through.
Yeah, it kind of jumped.
That makes it very McCaskill then, doesn't it?
Well,
Kenny's got a great reputation amongst nationalists because he got arrested on Wembley Way going to a Scotland-England football match.
Arrested for what?
Drunk and disorderly, I think.
Allegedly.
Doesn't it go beat up in my estimations if you get arrested by the Met?
Well, it's just another big name Scottish politician who has kind of jumped on the second independence party for the list. It seems to be gathering a bit of momentum.
I didn't think it is, mate. I keep looking at it and thinking the only momentum they're gathering is in the Rain Heeds and on Twitter.
Well, I think it'll gather momentum in the press purely and simply because the unionists will see it as a way to split the list vote, and it'll suit them.
Particularly now that Alliance for Independence are basically admitting that they're a vehicle for Tommy Sheridan. There was a Facebook post and a tweet yesterday from Hope Over Fear that explicitly stated, when we put Tommy back in Holyrood, things will start to happen. Really? Do we really need a convicted perjurer a guy who's been appealing that conviction for a decade and losing his appeals. And it only finally got thrown out last month.
Aye, aye.
Do we find,
sorry, Stuart.
Do we find, I mean, this week we obviously had the Russian report, which had a tiny wee one sentence about Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
And it was suggested, what was it, a whole paragraph? And it was suggested that the Russians had got involved simply because they had a television channel saying things, and one or two people were suspected to be Russian trolls and not pro-Indy people.
Well, what it actually said was the interference came after. It said post-referendum interference, and as much as they were trying to suggest that there's been shenanigans with the postal vote, I think it was.
Yeah, I've got to be honest with you. The more I look at it, the more I see it as an attempted smear, but a really bad attempt at it. They're insinuating that there was interference. They can't tell us where there was interference or how there was interference. They're just using it to basically put a black mark against 2014 so that they can use that black mark against a future.
Wait a minute. Wasn't there another country that definitely had a lot of interference? They handed out medals to their civil servants for the work they did. Where was that? Oh, that was London.
Yeah, but you're missing it here. Well, you're not missing it, guys. You're probably well aware of it. But every single press story I've seen about it has trailed it as interference in the Scottish referendum. And plenty of politicians have come out and said exactly the same thing. And that is what they were trying to achieve.
Yeah, that's what they were trying to get out there. Put that black mark against 2014 and therefore a black mark against anything that comes in the future.
And none of them have come out and said there was interference in the Brexit. You know, it has taken priority over a 2014 referendum has taken priority over a 2016 referendum that is actually going to make a huge change to this country, which the 2014, by definition of losing it, will not make any change.
And don't forget that Boris has also come out and explicitly stated that the Russians were trying to interfere in last year's general election. So we've to absolutely assume that they just, I don't know, maybe they went on furlough in 2016 and just chose not to get bothered with Brexit. Maybe Vladimir had some scheme for the KGB to take time off at that point.
Why are the mainstream media reporting on the effect it had on a referendum that changed nothing and not on the referendum that changed everything?
Because
it's totally ridiculous.
That's exactly what Whitehall want them to do.
I love that.
Exactly what they want.
There's a photograph, still from a James Bond movie with Bond on one side and Mem on the other, and she's issuing instructions, and the instructions are that what is it? Your mission? Your mission is definitely not to look.
Aye, we want you to do absolutely all, Mr. Bond.
Yes.
Just before Nicola came on air, guys, I was watching the old Michel Barnier on BBC Two. There's been another round of negotiations in London, and Michel was just gently pointing out that while they'd made significant progress in some areas, i.e. the areas that Britain wants there to be progress made around like goods and services, there's been absolutely zero progress on fisheries. He's basically came out and said that what Boris says and writes matters to the EU, because he's basically saying that Boris, in the political declaration, made some commitments that he is absolutely refusing to honour. And when he puts in the Telegraph, or wherever he decides to dump his latest article, that the EU are a bunch of shysters and that he has no intention of doing a deal with them, they pay attention to that and they take recognition of that. Basically, Barnier came out at his press conference and said, "You've got till October, mate. If you didn't come up with something new, beat it."
Well, the report I saw basically, well, what it essentially said was fishing, what court adjudicates any agreement disputes, and what was the third one? It's the three red lines, and Britain is just not going to move on them. In other words, Britain has decided to go for a no-deal Brexit.
Well, we know that.
But that's it, mate. The level playing field. The level playing field matters to Europe. They now absolutely think that this whole Brexit, the whole thing, is about Britain undercutting the EU single market.
Yeah,
if they finally come to that conclusion, not only will it be no deal, they will hammer the UK. The tariffs that we get hit with, you're not going to get your simple WTO thing. If the EU goes protectionist, Britain closes down very rapidly.
And I think cars could be one of the first to suffer. And I would imagine car factories are one of the few manufacturing places where trade unions might still just cause a big stushy. These days there aren't the same. They just don't have the same power.
I don't think so. I think the Japanese are well in bed with the unions now.
Norrie, we're coming back to your question a few weeks back. If only we could see the detail of the deal, the promises that Boris Johnson and the UK government.
Well, it was Theresa May.
To Nissan and Sunderland. Aye.
It was Theresa May, and I've got a sneaky feeling that effectively what it says is the UK government will cover the tariff costs.
Aye. But if the EU think that it says the same thing, mate, remembering that they are supposedly going to be manufacturing a couple of Renault models in that Nissan factory. If the French think the same way, then the tariff on UK motors will be immense.
Well, I mean, that plays into what you've just said about the level playing field. If the UK government has agreed to, how would we put it? I suppose it would come in as tax breaks to cover the cost of tariffs. The level playing field cannot be agreed.
Aye.
So where does the majority of the UK tax come from? They claim it's from the City of London. That's the biggest generator of our economy. Does that mean that's where the biggest tax take is? And we already know that most of the big finance houses have moved their brass plates to Frankfurt. They're also moved staff there. A lot of them, some of them have gone to Dublin, some of them have gone to Paris, but Frankfurt's gaining day after day. So what happens when this, a no deal?
If there are tariffs on British finance, British finance will move.
Yes,
that's simple.
If there's any form of tariff, I think what do they call it, passporting, where you can operate financial services throughout the EU single market. I can't see any way, if we even look close to no deal, I don't see how the UK financial market survives. I don't see how they have to move.
They won't. No, they won't move in the sense that they'll leave London.
No,
what they'll do is they'll open.
London,
they'll open offices in Frankfurt and Paris, and pay their taxes in Frankfurt and Paris.
Aye,
so there'll be a loss to the treasury.
Yeah, but
they won't move because the money laundering that they make so much money out of can only happen in London, because that's the only place where the rules are lax enough.
No, but I mean, the big thing is it's not just the City of London, it's British offshore crown territories, all these offshore colonies scattered around. One's close to hand, Jersey, Isle of Man, one's in the Caribbean, whatever.
Well, they're going down the tubes as well, Stuart, because what's going to happen with the City of London, it's going to turn into one of them. It's going to become the Cayman Islands on Thames.
Well, they call it Singapore on Thames, I think.
Yeah, but Singapore is a manufacturing centre.
No, it's not.
Singapore manufactures an awful lot of goods. An awful lot of goods. And Britain will not be that. Britain will become a service economy, and it will be serving the dodgy financial sector. Oh, and making a lot of jam.
Meanwhile, Scotland will see sense, decide that to give the SNP a massive majority in next year's election, and if we've got anything to do with it, there'll be some kind of upfront commitment by the SNP to get us the hell out of here before England implodes upon itself.
It'll be interesting if they end up with a big majority. Well, if they end up with a majority, it doesn't have to be big under this system. Any majority is a miracle.
Right.
At Holyrood, and Boris Johnson says no again. Even I might get off my backside and go on a demo.
There's that interesting thing. A question was asked last night on Newsnight. I don't know if you've seen Nick. What is it? Nick Eardley that was up here. But the question was asked as to whether Boris can afford to say no if there is that big majority. Of course, he can say it, but it's the ramifications of him saying it that could be a lot bigger than he is calculating for. I mean, seriously,
But that, if he says
SNP
no,
poll, I mean, right now they're what, 55% the SNP poll. If they get 51, 52 and get an outright majority, and he turns around and, I mean, what's his excuse for saying no? No, the majority of people in Scotland didn't want it. Well, they just bloody voted for it.
Well, the big thing is the perception of it. We then become an English colony in everybody's eyes.
Well, that's what they're trying to avoid. They don't want that to be apparent, obviously.
Yeah, aye.
It's become apparent to those of us who are committed independentists for quite a long time, but a lot of the soft yeses are still not necessarily 100% convinced about that.
Well, I would imagine, I mean, the tactic, were I the Tory Prime Minister, I would employ is to say no, but you can have it after the next general election. No, that's what I would do. And I would run it on the same day as the general election. And I would put all the polling stations at the top of Ben Nevis.
The problem with that, Norrie, is that...
Or in the middle of the fourth.
There's a reason that the Scottish Parliament passed the Referendums Act last year. And that reason will be that we run our referendum, that London has nothing to do with it, being the timing or the question.
Well, that depends how much power the Holyrood is left with by this time next year.
And that is I mean, I always think that Westminster is much more short-term than the SNP at Holyrood. I'm not sure that this wasn't a Gove idea and he was looking down the road a few years, because I don't think this overriding Scots law, Scots parliamentary decisions is actually to do with Brexit. I think it's all about maintaining the union.
Well, we know all along that this is a government led by, they are populists. They live in the world of Great Britain, you know, the empire. The loss of Scotland would absolutely shatter their self-belief.
The polling down in England for an independent England is interesting. You know, politics is a strange game, and what we might actually have is the English sneaking up behind us and throwing us out of the union.
Well,
wouldn't that be good fun?
Hoist by their own petard, this 20-year campaign of telling England that they subsidise us and that we are a drain upon their wonderful Jerusalem.
And if things get as tough as they could with a double whammy of coronavirus and Brexit, who knows? Maybe they'll start shouting from the rooftops, "Get rid of the jocks. We're not wanting to give them any more money."
We'll happily go.
Well, as I said yesterday, guys, I'm coming round to the idea that it's not so much the money that they want, it's what we might do with the money, because they are absolutely hating looking at an efficient government in Edinburgh that's showing up the debacle of London, and that would only get worse
Well, that's
Scotland
a
went
very,
independent.
very good point, Jimmy. There's a wee article the other day. I think it was probably on the Sunday papers. It was about Ireland, the beauty of a state. You know, Ireland is everything that England wants to be at the moment and isn't.
Well, aye, exactly. I mean, it's only a few years ago that they were telling us what a basket case Ireland was after the collapse in 2008, 2010.
Excuse me, I have it on good authority from an English Tory MP that Ireland's still part of Britain because you can get an Irish passport if you're a British citizen.
Oh,
am I wrong about that? Have I made a mistake there?
I think he might be. That might be one of the wee clones, the wee Penfold clones. You know, Andrew Bridgen or Mark Francois. I don't know what kind of factory keeps pumping out these wee short Napoleon syndrome Tory MPs, but it's getting a bit embarrassing looking at quite so many of them that are looking like that. But basically, mate, as I say, they told us a few years back Ireland was a basket case. Look at them now. Look at how efficient they have. Because they have all the levers of an independent nation, look at how they've put their economy back together over the last decade.
And they're nimble in their decision making. They can dance the dance. Whereas Westminster, I mean, the Brexit fiasco just shows what a quagmire the mother of all parliaments is.
Basically, we are run by a
ridiculous
public school elite, and most of them aren't the best of that public school elite. You know what I mean? It's like the old-fashioned families back in the day. The first son inherited, the second son went to the army, the third son went to the church, and if they had a fourth one, they went into politics. We are run by people who are the fourth sons.
Or spent his life in pubs and here he says. Well, guys, any funnies to finish? Anything that caught your imagination today?
There's a few beautiful cartoons like the one behind you, mate. I've seen a few belters. And let's be honest, that's the thing I would say to our listeners today. Give yourself a treat. Get on Facebook, get on Twitter or whatever, and check out how many quality memes are going to appear over the next 10 hours or so. Boris surrounded by nothing but sycophants.
Here's a thought to leave you with, right? Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, has come to Scotland and nobody knows what his itinerary is.
Right. And he's gone to what? Possibly one of the least populated areas of Scotland. One of the areas that's furthest away from the population base of Scotland. Why is he hiding away in Orkney? And why, I believe this afternoon, he's gone to an RAF base to tell them how wonderful they are.
Well, yeah, he's visiting his employees who are not going to boo him because they're in the army. Was Orkney not pro-Brexit?
I don't think Orkney was, mate.
Was it not one of the areas that was most pro-Brexit? I've got a 42% in my head, and I can't remember whether that was for or against. Anyway, it doesn't really matter because obviously the Council area voted for Brexit, as everyone did in Scotland.
Didn't Orkney just vote for whatever the local laird told them over the years?
Oh, Orkney's a liberal fiefdom, is it not?
Exactly.
Aye. Okay.
Oh, I found that bit that was saying a bit about Ireland. It was actually Tuesday's Guardian opinion, and it says here, the enviable beauty of a nation that knows where its people's interests lie. In other words, we've got a completely divided Britain over Brexit, a completely divided United Kingdom over devolution and independence, and a country going down the pluggle.
I don't think you could claim that Boris doesn't know where his people's interests lie. It's just his people aren't the people of the UK, that's all.
Aye, his people are the people of...
As usual, Norrie, you always find a wee gem there. Thank you.
Okay, guys. Thanks for that. Jimmy Hutton, thank you. Stuart Lockhead, thank you. And I'm Norrie Stewart. As I say, welcome to listeners on Indy Live Radio. You'll catch us at 11 o'clock on Indy Live Radio. There's a link on the iWrite Radio website to Indy Live Radio. We're also on YouTube and Spotify and all over the place. It would be unlikely you can't find us on your favorite podcast provider.
It's one of the easiest things to stick into Google. iWrite Radio.
Aye, the worry is that I keep getting people shouting YouTube at me, and I didn't think it's anything to do with the programme.
Okay, guys, thanks for that. We will not be broadcasting tomorrow.
Are we not?
So, well, we might be. Can I put it that way? We'll see if we can arrange.
I remember now. Okay, so we might not be.
Okay, but we might not be. So don't depend on it. Cheers for listening, folks, and bye for now.